Hi, I'm Lindsay from Phase2. If you work in pharma, you know how hard it is to balance speed, compliance, and clarity, especially when you're launching new digital experiences under pressure. That's exactly what we covered in our recent webinar. We sat down with Ionis Pharmaceuticals to talk about how they prepared their digital ecosystem for commercialization while navigating PRC, FDA submission, and the realities of scaling fast. Whether you're launching your first branded site or managing a growing portfolio, the session is full of practical lessons you can apply right now. I think you'll find it worth your time. Enjoy!
I'm going to start us off by welcoming everybody. Thank you so much. My name is John Cartier. I am the Pharma Program Director at Phase2 Technology. For anyone who might not be familiar with us, Phase2 is a digital experience agency. We're dedicated to advancing the human experience through technology. So we specialize in healthcare and combining data-driven insights with innovative solutions to create impactful digital products. At the end of the day, we are really committed to improving patient outcomes by helping our partners navigate the complexities of digital transformation. I'm joined by a number of friends on the call who you might see in the chat or on the webinar. In fact, my friend Lindsay is going to be dropping a survey into the chat here shortly to kick us off. We would really love to know at the top of the call here, what are you most interested in learning about today? What are you hoping to hear from us? So let's take a quick moment, if you don't mind. Go ahead and fill that out before we get started. And I'm already seeing some roll in right now. Multi-brand onboarding, real launch readiness, lessons from the trenches, all taking a lead here. Thank you for the folks that have already started dropping in your votes. Creativity versus compliance. We're starting to see that one actually take a lead with a majority of votes right now. Really good across the board spread though. So this is exciting because I think what we're seeing here is a number of the things that we'll be talking about today address a good number of these. Now we're starting to see just a pretty much even spread. Creativity versus compliance, adapting to change, scalability at launch, multi-brand onboarding, launch readiness, and lessons from the trenches. This is great. Great sign, and I think that we have really queued up an awesome conversation for you all today. So as folks are starting to put in the last of their votes, I'm going to go ahead and move us along with some introductions. I'm really excited about today's conversation. We're joined by some wonderful subject matter experts in pharma and in technology, and I'm going to let them introduce themselves right now. And just so our audience can get to know you a little bit better, Ling and Caroline, I would love for you to introduce yourselves and then tell me this interesting fact about you. If you had to teach a 60-minute class right now on any subject with zero preparation, what class could you teach confidently? And Caroline, why don't we go ahead and kick off with you?
That's a great question. I think no prep at all, especially a sunny, beautiful day. I would love to teach a hands-on zero to hero beginner mountain bike skills class. That would be a lot of fun.
That's great. Thank you so much. Ling, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and what your interesting class would be?
Sure. My name is Xiaojiang Ling. As you can see, I go with Ling, so that's easier for everyone. So I am the web product owner at Ionis Pharma. So I lead the web strategy and execution for all website at Ionis. So that fun fact about myself, teaching a lesson, I really interested in special education. And because my son actually was speech delayed since he was 3. So I study so much on my spare time about special education, ADHD, autism. So I have no problem, just probably 60 minutes, not enough, but that's something I want to talk with the group. Yes.
Amazing. Well, as I mentioned, my name is John Cartier. I am the director of the pharma program here. My interesting thing that I could teach with no preparation is how to do cowboy rope tricks. I grew up in Tucson, Arizona, which meant I was in the Tucson. We didn't really have the Boy Scouts. We had the Tucson, Arizona Boys Chorus. And if you're in the Boys Chorus, where John Denver once passed through and sang, you learn how to do cowboy rope tricks. So that's my very useless, interesting fact. Ling, since we kind of had you on the floor just there for a moment, I'd love if you could just take a moment here to briefly tell us a little bit about Ionis and set the stage for our partnership.
Absolutely. So I joined Ionis actually this year. So it's been a really, really honor to join this such a wonderful organization. So we are actually a biotech company. We focus on developing RNA targeted medicines for serious and rare diseases. So we've been leading this in this area for over 30 years. So our innovations and commitment to science are truly making a difference. So to support that science, right, and also ultimately our patients, having this smart, adaptable, compliant digital platform is really the key. So that's why I'm really excited and honored to be here to partner with our friends from Phase2, John and Caroline, to talk about how we put that into practice through our partnership.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Piggybacking off of Ling's introduction there, I'll take a moment to provide some context for the nature of our relationship on our side of the fence with Ionis. We've been working as an embedded partner alongside the Ionis IT and brand team for the last year, helping to streamline their digital infrastructure. That includes enabling them to shift from a more fragmented CMS environment to a centralized Drupal-based platform, creating a more standardized, scalable foundation for their portfolio brand. So together, we've supported the launch of several branded and unbranded websites, which has required coordination across multiple partner agencies, multiple timelines, multiple deliverables. And that really brings us to the topic of today's webinar. In working with Ionis as closely as we have the last year, the single most important truth that we've aligned on is that we have to continue to improve. We have to improve our work together, our collaboration, the delivery of our digital experiences, which is another way of saying, how do we build ourselves up and create that resilience against, the storm, the ongoing challenges of maintaining a program that scales. How do we set the tone? How do we launch our websites successfully? So we've brought together Ling and Caroline today to have a conversation about how we do just that. There are specific tools and processes that we will highlight as we go along. And I also want to point out that so much of this comes down to the human element, not just how we leverage those new tools, but how we collaborate, how we communicate, and how we depend on one another, which is why I think a conversation is the best place to start so that we can help those of you in the audience better understand the nuance and the grit required to build that resilience for the storm. So thank you, Ling and Caroline, for joining us today. Of all the questions that we could kick off our conversation with, I feel strongly that we need to dive into one of the biggest and one that our audience will probably know all too well, timelines adjusting. Whether that's because of design enhancements, PRC feedback, or external forces like urgent label changes, things do not always go exactly as they are roadmapped. And in pharma, the pressure to act quickly and efficiently is very real, right? You're not just launching a website, you're launching it in a high stakes, highly regulated environment with a lot of stakeholders and moving parts. So I want to start by pulling the curtain back on how teams actually stay aligned when those shifts happen mid-project. Caroline, from the Phase2 side, you've seen this across multiple launches. And Ling, from Ionis, you're right in the thick of managing this day to day. So when the plan changes, how do you keep everyone rowing in the same direction? Marketing, brand, IT. What helps your teams stay flexible without losing that focus? And Caroline, maybe you can kick us off first on this question.
Sure, yeah. And sitting in the engineering seat, and that end of the project, we see this a lot. So as the team that's responsible for actual implementation, I think we're most vulnerable to this happening because there's all of the steps that happen up into it, have that opportunity for something to not go to plan. As John mentioned, there's probably 1,000 ways that this can happen. So I think timeline shift is going to occur. I think it is an exceptionally rare project. So rare, I'm not so sure it exists where this does not happen. So timeline shifts are not I think it's easy to see that as a crisis, or as a, like, oh no, it's going wrong. And I think it's no more going wrong than rain happening is going wrong. It's really, how do we respond to it, and how do we deal with it, and how do we create enough resiliency in the way that we work and the way that we're delivering this, such that it isn't a crisis. Rain is not a problem unless it's a flash flood, then it's a problem. So I think it really does overwhelmingly come down to the ability to respond, and ultimately that's collaboration. It is almost impossible to over communicate, I think, especially in an ecosystem that has so many different partners, and I think slowing down and taking a minute and saying, okay, who is likely impacted by whatever the shift is, whatever the thing is, whatever is causing the plan to go slightly awry, and then sitting down and working the problem. So, for instance, maybe we need to make an adjustment to the meta tagging on the site, right? The SEO landscape has to shift. That team got a bunch of feedback, and they have to do a major resubmission and a rework. Okay, well, who's that going to impact? So let's identify the people who are impacted by this, and let's sit down and replan. And if you just sort of see it as that, okay, this is a new constraint, and we're gonna work the problem, and we're inevitably going to be replanning throughout the process. It's not as sort of daunting as, oh well, we failed, right? Like the plan is broken, we failed to keep it on the rails. Like that is a really exhausting and ultimately not realistic attitude to have towards our plan. Was useful, but it's not going to stay intact, and that's okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that idea of it being okay that we need to show up to the table and just have a conversation. That is not inherently the problem here. The problem here is trying to work the solution. Ling, do you have thoughts on this as well?
Yeah, I totally agree with Caroline. I mean, we've been together through all these things at a daily basis, almost every day. To add on her point, being upfront, being transparent, thinking about the impact as a team, for me, that's really the key, right? Because even though we're different functional teams, but we're one team. If we have that mindset, things just naturally happen, right? Like no pointing fingers, because we're one team, right? We have the goal, right? If we're playing sports, right? The goal is whoever get the dunk, we win. Like I feel like if we have that mindset, we will naturally, when we shift the priorities, people are like, okay, why do we have to do it? Let's do it, right? Or if there's any missing pieces, we will like, oh, we missed that piece. Let's work on it, even though that means a shift to the timeline. And then to add on that, the communication, right? How can we make sure, like Carolyn said, we have so many vendors, we have internal, external, a lot of key stakeholders, especially during the moment of change. Things need to happen very fast. Like how can we make sure we constantly making sure the key stakeholders are informed, learn the impact, make quick decisions, right, to shift things around. So one thing I've been really focusing, I mean, Caroline, the same, we're partnering on is to knowing our audience, right? Seeing, what level of, project familiarity they have. Maybe they just want to know as a, what's the impact for a timeline change? Or they need details, like what does it mean from a budgeting perspective, from, actual content improving a process. So if we know that, that'll really help us moving forward. So maybe sometimes just sharing a dashboard, sometimes it's an in-depth working session. And then how can we, use the right language to show them the urgency, the need that we need to shift and reprioritize, juggling between, is this more important or is that important? I have one example really is, for example, code freeze. A lot of people, if they're not dev or a project team, they'll be like, why do we need code freeze? That sounds like confusing. Can we cut it, right? And put mine over here if things gonna ship? But how can we tell them, translating the words that, I mean, that's something Caroline really worked and I work really hard on, is to tell them, it's like shipping a package. Once it's sealed, you reopen, you relabel, you retract it, it's gonna delay the delivery. So I think that's ultimately what we're trying to do when things really, shifts a lot. We work as a team, we trust each other, we reinforce each other to really help as a team.
I love that. I think there's a great takeaway for our audience there, which is that in these industries that are regulated by so many approval gates that you have to pass through, you are at risk of making your life unintentionally more stressful by making the assumption that everybody in the room understands the nuance of every single step. This really is a process that benefits from making the implicit explicit. And that's fine. Everybody's very busy. Everybody is answering for numerous things. Take that time to slow down. Make what you think is implicit explicit. You'll be surprised by the number of hands that go up in the room that say, oh, I wasn't aware of that. How can we work around that? Great takeaway. Thank you. Let's jump us to the next question here. Let's say that timeline has shifted then, and maybe you're a few weeks out, maybe even days, and now the pressure is really on, right? This is the moment where everything starts to feel urgent and it's easy to get caught in a reactive loop, but not everything that feels urgent is necessarily important for launch specifically. And staying focused on what truly matters, what's going to move the needle of success forward, can be the difference between a scramble and a smooth rollout, right? Being prepared for that storm, that busyness. So Caroline, I'd love to hear how you guide teams through that decision making in the heat of the moment. And Ling, from your side, how do you make those trade-offs internally when the pressure is high, but you still want to deliver something that is high quality and aligned, right? Like, what helps you keep perspective when every request suddenly feels like a fire drill? And Ling, do you want to kick us off on this one?
Sure, yeah. So, I mean, it goes along with the first question, right? It actually comes up a lot. Like Caroline said, I personally, 99% of my projects shift, priorities during the process of the project launch. So, especially in pharma. But we know when we're dealing this kind of urgency, sometimes it's tough, but it gotta be that person to say, let's hold off, right? And ask some questions like, what is the actual risk here, right? What is the real impact? Are we impacting our patient user experience? That's critical, right? Or this is legal and compliant related, that's critical. Or if it's actually a broken page, a broken functionality that make the site really bad, that's high priority. So we need to think about the real, or it just, my image does not look good on mobile, or there's a couple of pixels that my button is away from the the left side or the right side. There are different things, right? But like what John said, different teams, right, have different priorities. We have to respect that. Legal will look at consent, data privacy, right? Designer will look at their layout. They're proud of their layout, proud of their responsiveness. And marketing team will look at the data and the segmentation, right? Actually, the submission, do I really gather data I wanted? So all these things matters from their perspective. How we gonna, guide them through this process? That's where I found sometimes I learn is we're just gonna need to step up, and take the ownership and lead the way, right? Even it's not technically my problem, I mean, or Caroline's problem, but we see that's coming. We just need to, hold our stakeholders and guide through the trade-offs, guide through the risks, right? And try to create the work and work stream that is reasonable, that is truly following the priorities. And then, yeah, I think that's my thought for this question.
Yeah, I love what you're encouraging here is in an environment where there's so many responsibilities and to-do list items to get done. It can be a natural human response to assume somebody else is going to step up, like you just described. And by being the person who does that, what you're actually encouraging and fostering is a culture of other people wanting to match that same energy, stepping up with you. So suddenly those things that feel like they're falling between the cracks, you've got more people with eyes on them, sort of lifting the entire project together. Caroline, thoughts on this or any specific examples you might have of experiences like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think I think that a lot of times it's really difficult to separate sort of the emotional experience that we are in of the project and the objective reality. And so one of the things that really contributes to that stress is that feeling of stuff's falling between the cracks, right? And what, especially in a large sort of multi-vendor complex project landscape, which is sort of just table stakes for pharma in a way that I think some other industries don't have as large a challenge in that way. It's, I think the natural reaction is to just say, like, I can't deal, there's too much going on, I can't deal with it. I'm just going to say, this is what I'm supposed to do. That's not me problem. And so I think paradoxically, by taking on, like what you're saying, like, taking on a little bit more and saying, you know what, no one thought about the blank. We got it. Like, no one is really scoped to do that API integration for the webinar. But it needs to happen, and it's really critical path, and I think we can make this work. When you extend that, like, kind of offering what everybody wants to pitch in more. So that's part of it. But I think a big piece to kind of dig into the root of the question here is, and we've sort of all talked about this, is just when we are in a stressful situation, which the weeks leading up to the launch, you're going to be stressed, right? It is stressful. It's an intrinsically sometimes overwhelming process. To be mindful of the fact that we are, as human beings, we're very bad at being objective. So humans who are stressed, we get dumber and we get worse at prioritizing. It's just how we're wired, right? So this is where it can be really, really valuable to have, prior to at the beginning of a project, really defined what are, first principles, what's the most important thing for us to do. So a lot of times these sites and these projects are going to be around a conversion, like usually a sign up, or there's some action that we're hoping either our HCPs or potential patients or active patients are going to take. Okay, that sign up is the beating heart of this project. Well, that when you're in that moment of stress, you can use that to back up and say, okay, the 5 things that have to happen. We have to be compliant. Like, legal compliance is non-negotiable. The form functioning and us being able to capture that information is non-negotiable. There's no point in doing the rest of this if we don't have these things. And when you have that, that can be a really valuable way to realign, like, okay, there's too much. There's too many things going on right now. What should the overall team be focused on? Is there something that's putting these core things at risk? That is helpful for the decision-making piece, but it's also actually, ironically, saying some things aren't important is actually a way to be less stressed, right? If we can take like, for instance, I had a conversation today where, we've got something where we're anticipating these assets are just late. It is what it is, right? It just, things have occurred. And I asked the question, well, what would happen if we don't have these in time for launch? What if we have only the ones that we've previously used that are sort of the interim ones, but have technically been signed off on? And you could watch everyone go, oh, I think maybe that would be okay, right? Could we do it on a follow-on? So that's, I think, having your prioritization, really being ruthless about what the hierarchy of needs are, can be a way not only to facilitate good collaboration and decision making, but also as just a really effective stress management tool. When everything is really, really critical, it is difficult to function well in that space. So finding a way to say, we care about this, but it actually objectively isn't as important as this other thing, reduces the pressure. And also a lot of times, and maybe there are people on this webinar who are in the rock and a hard place seat where you know, maybe you're the one who has to deliver the bad news or the difficult conversations. And so by having this, it's not all on, you don't have to play kingmaker. You're not the one who's just deciding. It's like, well, no, we all are aligned towards, these are the ultimate objectives we need to achieve. Let's prioritize those. So I you know, that really having clarity and then communicating that well and revisiting it early and often, of what are we really trying to achieve here, what's actually important. I can't emphasize that enough. I'm going to stop talking about it now because I feel like I've made my point. But and then you know, again, I think often we all, it's true of any creative endeavor, we see all the imperfections, right? The creators and the makers see all the problems. And it is easy to forget that, especially in the web space, the digital space, you know, we're not sending a book out to print, right? The flaws in it will not be on people's coffee tables for the rest of time. It's, you know, we can improve things over time. So if you are in that position where you have to make some difficult calls, it doesn't mean that you're stuck living with it permanently, right? Like frequently we can do what is necessary to achieve, you know, those really, really critical goals. And then maybe the things where, you know what, it just bugs me, I really don't love that animation, I don't think we quite hit the mark, you can follow on and update it later.
You know, it's interesting because in a lot of ways, I think what makes this industry really tough is the idea that it is much more waterfall, right? The gates that we pass through are not agile inherently. And I'm sure there's many people right now in attendance that are used to, you know, a decade's worth of, we kind of adjust the scope as we go. From phase two stance, from my stance in a direct role overseeing a lot of these projects, I see that as somewhat liberating, which is a bit counterintuitive. In knowing exactly what PRC is going to need or what is going to potentially get pushed back by the FTA, it helps us have those prioritization conversations so much more efficiently, right? And that's where we really bring people together to make that distinguishing point that I think you're driving at, Caroline, here, which is what is personal preference, what is absolutely non-negotiable, and that line is drawn so much more clearly, and that's actually a superpower. It really allows us to align so much more faster. I'm also noticing a really interesting sort of trend in some of your responses here, that so much of this comes down to the soft skills, the human element of bringing together and working as a unit. And in a world where we are adopting so many valuable AI tools, especially, and we've got some tools that we'll talk about here in a little bit that we really like. You know, it still goes to show that at the end of the day, we need humans in the seats to help adopt these tools, and we need to make sure that we're communicating with one another on how we are collaborating on using them across the board. So I think this is a great example of how we are adopting that sort of AI human first approach to solving some of our problems. For the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and just nudge us forward to our next question, which sort of elaborates a little bit about what you were talking about, Caroline. You know, in pharma, launch teams, they often span multiple agencies, platform vendors, creative partners, technical specialists. So when timelines change or the scope shifts, it's not just about keeping your core team in sync. It's about communicating clearly across multiple organizations without creating a bottleneck or misalignment, right? So I know both of you have helped coordinate these kind of multi-partner ecosystems, from regulatory to brand to dev, to help keep everyone on the same page even when things are flux. So what's worked well for you when things move fast, but collaboration still has to stay tight? Are there rituals or roles or tools you rely on to keep everyone oriented to avoid that game of telephone? Caroline, do you want to kick us off there?
Sure, yeah. And I mean, I am an external agency. So you know, I'm in this seat very much so. I think I think, you know, Ling, you'd mentioned this earlier, and I think it is very easy to see this as like, how do I connect all of the silos and how do I make sure all of these separate pieces get communicated to, and who should be on what, and does so and so need access to the who's a what's it. And I think that for a lot of reasons, trying to adopt that one team mindset is helpful. Because ultimately, we're doing the same thing. We're all part of this big project, right? And the success of that project will be judged ultimately as a whole cohesive thing, right? Like, you can be the SEO vendor and knock the tagging out of the park. If the rest of it's not successful, nobody cares, right? So I think, again, just it's one project, it's one team. So does the team benefit from knowing blank? And almost always the answer is yes. There are going to be some things that are a little bit more specific where truly it doesn't have impacts, and that's fine. But I think trying to push yourself into a little bit of a default of, again, over communicate. More people probably benefit from being in the know, even if it's not part of their SOW or whatever scope of work. And so that's one piece of it. And then I think the other piece that is often really challenging, especially when there's a lot of people in the space, and especially from the more creative side, is communicating and showing your work in progress. So one of the things that's really challenging is the like HGTV style big reveal. I think that a lot, that's great. It makes for great television. It makes for great television. It's really challenging from a project management perspective and a collaboration perspective to go, oh, we went that way, huh? So I think, building the habit, and it may be that, again, for those of us on this call, we may have to be really intentionally model this, but showing people kind of where we're at prior to being done with whatever your individual deliverable is really helps everyone shift to, like, that resiliency is built when I can see something coming, right? So for instance, let's see, I gave an example earlier, and I'll shift. This is totally a theoretical one here, but like, one team is having a really hard time getting assets from another vendor that they're using that we're not all talking to. And we might say, like, how's this going? How's it going? How's it going? Oh, it's going good. It's going good. Yep. Yeah, we're on target. And then deadline day comes. Just kidding. We're not on target. Now it's a scramble. Whereas if we're being a little bit more transparent about that, of like, hey, I have 4 of 5 layouts completed, but I'm really stuck waiting on this one, that invites other people to say, so like, as the development partner, I might say, that's fine. We'll do the 5th one later. Let's get started on those 4 first.
Yeah.
And then as the person who I'm speaking to on the other side of the screen, I've watched the reaction go, oh, wait, so this isn't a catastrophe? Well, it's like, well, no, we can work with that, right? Like, let's adapt. So that, one, bias towards telling more people than you think, and then 2, bias towards in progress understanding building. I think those 2 things, when rapid changes occur, everybody already is so much more plugged in, and you can respond quickly versus needing to play a massive game of catch up, which is just really difficult.
Yeah. I think that's another great takeaway for the audience here, is that counterintuitive nature of, we put our best foot forward. Nobody wants to represent themselves as if they haven't put as much time and energy and care into something as they know they can. But when it comes to the speed, and when it comes to the gates that we have to pass through in this industry, it makes you even look better to increase that collaboration dial and be willing to show things that are in flux. I think that shows, in my opinion, a level of maturity to help the entire team move quickly. So again, it's counterintuitive. Nobody wants to show things, as Caroline's been talking about, nobody wants to show the back of the napkin, before it's ready. But that is actually something worth applauding in this industry. Ling, thoughts on this?
Absolutely. I think Caroline and team's been really doing really well on these pieces because I know how hard I've been working with so many different agencies. Like Caroline said, so many design agencies, SEO agencies, multiple things about, assets or things like that. And everybody operate differently. And some of them, exactly like Caroline said, they don't want to show their undone product. However, it's the key, right? To know the unknown. When we scope the unknown, it's less fear, it's easier like to be a little bit flexible to those changes when it comes, right? So for example, I don't really have any wireframes to show you, but let's launch on this date. That is scary. But I said I have one page. I want to have a hero. I want to have a couple of CTAs. I want to have a form. Can we do that? That's much easier because you kind of know, even though it's not done, even though it's not handed over from design to development, because you know what to expect. I think that really helps the communication happens, when there's rapid change about now I want my hero below my CTA. Usually it doesn't happen. I'm just giving examples, a hero does need to be above it. But so just things like that, when we know the change, right, it's easier to accept it. And also I found really successful is be upfront and be honest. Sometimes it just won't work out. It just because we all operate a different way, right? As an external agency, you have your own tool. You probably have Jira, you probably have Monday.com, you probably have Slack, have Teams, have Zoom, whatever the things you want to communicate the way works the best for you. But it might not work for us, or it might not work for the cross-functional team that we struggle a little bit. Like I don't like emails, especially with the 30 people like email. I have a hard time read through it and grab the piece and who am I talking to? Like, who is this person or that person? But sometimes you gotta use emails, right? And sometimes we gotta kick off a Teams just to do a in-depth session, see what the blocker is. So that really, we have to use our judgment, our individual intelligence to make sure we are moving forward and use the communication tools or process that makes sense. But for me, there's one more thing I need to add on is we do sometimes need a structural process as an organization, right? Because if we just let the freestyle go, it just sometimes is not efficient, right? We gotta keep our documentation somewhere. We gotta keep our weekly focus on our agenda. We have to hit the milestones, right? What are the things that while we're changing fast, we're not skipping, right? We're making sure key stakeholders are informed. We're making sure important documentations are in place. We're making sure, the important conversations are happening. So nobody's blocked. So that's some must-haves, right? But in the meantime, like Carolyn said, we just need to be flexible, try different things, right? Talk through it, work together. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. What we're kind of really talking about here is a kind of cultural alignment. Within Phase 2's Pharma program, we work with a number of clients outside of Ionis as well. And what we're identifying here is a number of accelerators. We're here as an experienced agency to help you move quickly and hit those deadlines. And there are accelerators we can leverage to move even faster. So across the program at Phase 2, when we're working with different clients and different brands, our conversations are all exactly what Ling's talking about right here, which is which of these accelerators that are available to us to more culturally align ourselves on can we start leveraging? Can we use to speed us up to move even faster? And I'll tell you, as the director of the program, I see the brands that are willing to go all in on all of the possible accelerators, the cultural alignment, those are the ones that are moving the fastest. So it really is about unpacking any sort of previous concept of what it was like to deliver digital experience over the last decade and kind of go into this new, interesting hybrid world within pharma that is very much waterfall, but there are very much levers, and understanding that nuance is something that we love talking with our clients about. It's very much an educational process up front when we meet with clients like Ionis to share our perspective. What have we learned through our program that we can help really start to speed things up? All right, let's keep cruising along here. I'd love to just drill a little bit further and see if we can highlight a couple key takeaways for our audience. Are there some tools or processes specifically that you're finding really, really valuable right now at any specific phase? But, specifically as we are moving towards that launch, helping people really prepare for the urgency that comes with that. Caroline, you want to start us?
Bug herd.
Tell us about Bug Herd, Caroline.
Bug herd. I'd love to talk to you about bug herd. No, I mean, I think bug herd, like herding bugs, herding cats, herding bugs. Just generally, like Ling touched on, there's a lot of just difficult to manage but sort of function processes, like emailing around marked up PDFs that work but cause a lot of friction. And so more modern options like Bug Herd are a really, really excellent way to keep track of every piece of feedback, where it is, who reported it, what screen were they looking at, are we missing an asset? Can I ask for clarity? Like having all of that organized, not across 1,100 emails and round 3 feedback final second or whatever is a major quality of life improvement. So I would say look for places that have friction. There's probably a really nice modern tool to solve that problem. As a developer, I would like to talk to you about Bug Herd.
Have you heard the good word? She's going to show up after the webinar. She'll be at your door.
Yes,
I will give a second to this. When we talk about those accelerators a moment ago that help us move fast, absolutely, this is a tool. Ling, what have you got for us?
Mine is less boring, I have to say, because mine is literally a very old-fashioned checklist. So we started working with phase 2, and we have this amazing checklist from phase 2. We extended at Ionis, right? This is not really a tool. You can use it on Excel, you can use it on Google Sheet, it doesn't matter. But it's a centralized checklist, literally a checklist, check, right? With different things we must do before launch or before a feature, update or whatever major deployment. And the thing I really like it is with so many different, partners and different groups and shifting priorities, there's going to be a list of things you can't miss before launch. And then what are those? Who's responsible for those? And we do that ahead of time. So everyone has action item, right? This is on with my name listed there, right? And I checked. So we avoid pointing fingers afterwards. We avoid human error, right? Just say, oh my God, I forgot. I totally forgot about this because it's happening, right? But for that 20-person team, if we all doing that and just doing that old-fashioned like school, we check this, we check that, and we go back home, right? With all the things done. And that can really make sure actually we just did the same practice a couple of weeks ago for our website launch, and like 20 people team, we complete UAT within 3 days, 3 business days. So that's, for me, that's really a big win. Because to be honest, before I joined Ionis, I was like, a checklist? Really? But it's effective, it's simple, it's action driven. So now I think it's really good. It's very valuable. In the future, we might want to look into, maybe moving from a Excel checklist to like a more interactive checklist, maybe in Jira, or use other tools. That's something we're working on. Yeah. But I think that's a big difference to make sure we have a successful, clear goal and list to complete the web launch.
Yeah. Yeah, I think the larger the group, the simpler the checklist, the more straightforward. As we drill down into our internal check-ins, our checklists, Caroline and I are big fans of Monday.com. It's a project management tool that I'm certain many people have heard of. There's automations that can be built into that. They're incorporating some AI tools as well. So smaller groups, fancier tools, larger groups, keep it simple. All right. I'm going to race us through our last question here, Caroline and Ling, because we'd love to leave some time for Q&A, but let's close with this one. Everyone on this call knows what it's like to be busy, especially leading up to the launch. But being busy doesn't always mean you are making progress. So how do you tell the difference? How do you know your systems are actually improving and not just getting more complex for the sake of getting more complex? More importantly, how do you know your team is maturing, learning, and gaining confidence over time? So what signals do you look for that tell you you're heading in the right direction? And Ling, do you wanna start us off on this one?
Sure. Yeah, I actually, there are so many things, right? For example, your KPI, of course, your dashboard, your data on, the very in-depth technical stuff we can do. But here are some things I want to talk about, like John said. What are the signals? What are the things I feel like we're doing it right? Like meetings with agenda, right? And meeting with appropriate people on the list. And also other stuff like when we are talking about changes, when we are doing prioritizations, when we're trying to solve a problem, like are the response collaborative and flexible and understanding each other's point rather than just no, that doesn't not make any sense. Don't change that. That's non-negotiable. If we're seeing more and more when we talk about things like I just used, right, like code freeze, or like Carolyn said, let's use buck herd. Let's fill this in like the very old-fashioned checklist. When people start to see the reason behind it, rather than a little bit resistant on the way they currently are working on, I think as a team we're doing better. And one last thing I want to touch is a retro. I mean, even though we're not true agile, but like John said, we're trying our very, very hard to be agile with the waterfall deadline. But what are we sharing at the retro? We actually had a retro a couple of weeks ago, and I'm so proud, like how many things we came up together as a team, seeing what we can do better, right? And then just talk out loud, right? I didn't do this right, or I can do more, or there are things like we need to do a little bit differently. When people start to say things like that and take on the actions to actually make a change, I think we're doing it right. We're on the right path. And I'm seeing with our partnership with Phase2, Ionis, we're going that route. We're making those good progresses. We're really looking forward to what's next. So I think we're actually getting better. So
That's great. That's the trajectory we always want to be moving. Thank you very much, Ling. Caroline, what do you got for us?
Oh man, those are good. Those are really good. Yeah, I think the retro was really great. I think when you're seeing, multiple vendors in a call, uh, volunteering of their own accord ways that they can make everybody else's jobs easier, and like calling out and appreciating people who are ostensibly competitors across the table, and figuring out ways to grow and improve in a really open-hearted way. Like that's, you're not gonna get a more slam dunk sign than that. I think also just another thing to look for is launches should become boring. Like I love, my favorite as the technical lead for these things, my favorite sentence to hear on a launch day is, wait, so that's it? I love that sentence. That's music to my ear. That's what it should be like. Wait, we're live? Wait, yeah, we're live.
That was it.
We're done. We're good.
Yeah.
So I think when you put in the hard work ahead of time to hit this, to get better and to improve, the reward are those interactions and those feelings, and that's this sort of sentiment of this just feels easy. Everybody's here to help each other out. It's easy. It's not simple. So I think those are really lovely. Those are really lovely things to look for, and are achievable. It's not.
Yeah.
This is not pie in the sky thinking. This really does happen.
Yeah. So being a champion of that collaborative spirit, fluency, kind of using and signaling that vocabulary that you're taking that time to understand not just your piece of the puzzle, but everybody else's piece because you're engaged, you're in it. And from I have to imagine, Ling, from your seat, to see all these agencies diving in and showing up in that way only fosters a sense of wanting to work with them even more, right? Like if people are making your life easier, why wouldn't you want to continue that relationship as long as it's making you prosperous, right? So that's that kind of like counterintuitive nature of like everybody roll your sleeves up and help each other out. And I'm getting the hook from the side of the screen that we got to move on. So I'm going to jump us into QA here. Folks, feel welcome to drop any questions or comments in the chat right now that you might have, and we'll do our best to spend a few minutes here answering those. I do have one while folks are entering their questions that was sent to me that I can throw out to the group right now. What do you think is the biggest challenge you see pharma teams facing with digital products today? And any thoughts you might have on those. So Caroline or Ling, either of you feel free to jump into that. What do you see as the biggest challenge for pharma teams today with digital products?
I can kick off, Caroline. I mean, one of the big challenges, because I only got limited time, definitely there are more, but I'm thinking about is really in reality and the crazy amount of digital products in the world, like which one to pick, which one is the right one, right? For example, when I download the app, I probably won't be able to read all the reviews or check the prices or compare. Now with ChatGPT, mine is a little bit easier, but what is the right tool fit the customer needs, right? Sometimes things need to happen so fast, and then usually they don't have time. And how to guide them and give them that advanced time to let them know what do you need, not just how much money you have, is that really fit your need? And is that have a long-term goal that can scale in the future, and not just like, oh, this is simple and quick, let's do it. And then eventually take Caroline and team like hours and hours try to, make a change, deploy. So I think that's, for me, that's kind of hard to, this challenges I've seen.
Yeah, choice overwhelm is real. And it's only going to get more overwhelming as we're seeing an explosion of tools and options out there. I think I would say to that, the making a choice, not making a choice is making a choice, right? So I think it's better to just pick one that's good and not worry about whether or not you've picked the one that's perfect, than it is to get just sort of sucked into the undertow of of needing to evaluate a list of choices that does not stop changing.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good one.
That touches on another theme here that we're seeing, which is really, to be in this industry is to accept and adopt speed. And I think that it's not the kind of place where you're ever going to be, at least in our program, this is something we culturally promote, is we don't really reprimand anybody for making fast decisions that don't work out. When things aren't working, it's because we haven't made decisions, and we don't have time in this industry to not do that. So I think that talks a lot about the different things we've touched on today that we have to move on. One more question that just came in, and then we'll wrap up here. This is an interesting one about content. How do you make sure content works for both patients and doctors? What is that like when putting one of these pharma websites up?
Yeah, I mean, I think frequently we are able to differentiate and have separate sites for separate audiences, but obviously, like, can't prevent an HCP from looking at a patient site. And I think, good content design should be accessible to a broad variety of audiences. Obviously our tone is going to be a little bit different depending on who we're targeting. But I think if you're looking at, if you are reviewing content that's been put in front of you and you have like a sinking pit feeling in your stomach that this really doesn't work for one of those audiences or the other, that might be a good heuristic for maybe we're not actually hitting the tone we need to hit here. Obviously, it is a dedicated patient that wants to read a highly technical MOA section, but our HCPs are super busy, and if it's so deep as to be unparsable for a patient, maybe it's going to be unparsable for a really busy but very well-educated HCP as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I don't know if that really answers the question, but I think we don't have to be all things to all people, but it doesn't hurt to have multiple audiences in mind as we create these experiences.
Great. Awesome. Okay, well, with our 3 remaining minutes here, I want to thank everybody for their time today, people on our panel and people in the audience as well. There's so much we could talk about on this subject, even more than we might fit into this hour, and clearly it's something that we're very passionate about. So speaking of, you've probably seen my good friends Ryan and Brian in your inbox or in the chat. They're going to follow up with you to see if you have any additional questions or feedback on today's conversation, so keep an eye out for that in your inbox. And finally, as you see, we've got one more survey for you all, which Lindsay just put up for you. We'd love to know what you'd like to see from us next. Feel free to vote as you head out the door. Any conversations or topics that you're finding particularly interesting, Phase 2 loves the opportunity to put these together and help sort of share what we've learned. So thank you again on behalf of Phase 2 and Ionis. We hope that everybody has an excellent rest of their Tuesdays and that the weather is nice where you are. So Caroline Ling, thank you so much. And y'all have a good day.
Thank you,
Thanks,
John.
everyone.
Thank you, everyone.